colonialism? How does it actually
Sorry to
relate?
interrupt you, Michelle. I will stop you for 1 second and I apologize for that. We did want to record the session for those who are not able to make it. So I hope that's okay with you. If you don't want your face to be recorded, then now's the moment to turn off the camera. We're just recording to share with people who weren't able to attend. And I think it will be useful for us to be able to share this with those who wanted to be here. So I do apologise for the interruption, Michelle, and let you know that if you don't want to be on the recording, then please turn off your video now.
Thanks, Lucy. So just going back to the overview of the course. So the first day, we really cover what is colonialism. We use the term a lot. It means different things to different people, but what does it actually mean in terms of the development and humanitarian sector? And what does it mean when it comes to our research and monitoring and evaluation practice? So on that first day, we really lay the groundwork for trying to identify the legacies, the threads of colonialism that may have crept into our monitoring and evaluation and research work. We wrap up the end of the day one by looking at what are feminist principles, what do they actually offer, and how do they help us to think about decolonizing research and monitoring and evaluation. The second day, we really jump right into the practicalities. And so really thinking about what are the principles and the strategies we can use to decolonize. And the rest of the sessions across the remaining 3 days look across the M&E project phase and the research phases. So starting from when we're designing and scoping out our research and M&E projects, right to our design, our data collection, our analysis and dissemination. And so we start off by looking at some examples at the design stage of a project. And there's opportunities here for group work on the second day to reflect on a research project together, to look at the method section, to look at some tools, some questionnaires and interview guides, and really to apply some of the initial principles that we've been looking at to analyze and to kind of pick apart some of these tools that we might normally be using. On the third day, we explore this idea of alternative research methods and what is it that makes a method decolonial or colonial? Is this straightforward? How do we kind of unravel that? And we look at different approaches using Indigenous research, we draw on participatory research, and methods that are often labeled as decolonial. Asking ourselves the question, are these really decolonial? What is it that makes them colonial or not? And we have group work again to discuss some different examples of methods. Things like most significant change, vignettes, sense maker are all approaches that we kind of look at and tear it apart a little bit. And then day 4, we really look at the analysis phase. And dissemination. How does our language, the way in which we analyze data, the visuals that accompany our data, how might they reinforce colonial power hierarchies and how can we address these? And again, there's group work to analyze a full report together. And so what is really nice, I think, about the course is the opportunities to learn from each other. We have people from across the globe who come together, bringing their own experiences of monitoring and evaluation and research and sharing their expertise. And so bringing that together to think about what does it look like when we use these feminist principles to think through these different issues. So we can move to the next slide, Lindsay. And what I thought would be helpful today was to introduce a few of the colonial behaviors that really underpin the discussions in the course. It's, I think, easy to think about the history of colonialism, and some of us might be able to pinpoint, yes, I see those colonial threads in the world today. But what is helpful is breaking down some of that legacy into behaviors. And so a few that I've collected and that as training participants have collected over the years. The first is around being top down in decision making. And we see that in colonialism, the way colonial actors came in with ideas of what they felt was needed. Linked to the second point, they didn't value community knowledge or expertise, but they would often cast aside community ways of knowing, ways of making decisions, community medicine, traditional medicine, in favor of things that were perceived as being modern or things that would help colonized countries to progress. And so we talk a little bit about how we might see some of these threads of colonial behaviors in our world today. Colonial powers assumed what issues were important to populations. They didn't really let them have a say, much like we see in the aid and development sector today. Assumptions that might be made about what people need, about what research should be done, about what data is needed, about what the priorities and the needs are. The idea of a Western worldview as a standard or norm is a very colonial kind of idea. This idea that what the West or what Europe does is the measuring stick. And this is sometimes referred to as the white gaze. And so we talked a little bit, how do we see the white gaze present in our monitoring, evaluation, and research practice? Colonialism also has this tendency of presenting communities as other, as really different, exotic, barbaric, people that we kind of observe from afar. And we talk a little bit about this kind of tone that presents itself in monitoring and evaluation and research, and then how this comes across sometimes as being a kind of a righteous tone of superiority, of power over another group. So with these colonial behaviors in mind, we talk a little bit about how we see that in monitoring and evaluation and research, and we'll have a chance to reflect on this together in a few minutes. So we can go to the next slide. See, thanks. So an example here from the Bukavi series, which is a series of comics that were developed in the Democratic Republic of Congo and other settings that reflect a little bit on the dynamics that are often present in research. This idea of an actor often at the local or the field level doing all the work, but not receiving and not being recognized for the contributions that they made. And so these kinds of power hierarchies present themselves in how our research contracts are managed, in how we interact with people who we label as the data collectors or the people whose data that we eventually use. Go to the next slide. Thanks, Lucy. One of the things that we do in this course is we reflect a little bit and we question some of the common narratives that might be present within our monitoring and evaluation, our research, within the way we present and depict the problems of others. And here I've put a few examples about narratives around girls, which can also reflect some of these white savior and colonial ideas. This idea that girls hold unlimited potential. And here we see colonialism and gender intersecting in a kind of message about modernity and what counts as being modern. Some of you might have seen the very popular Girl Effect video that declares girls to be the solution to hunger, to poverty, to war. And the message is that if you invest in a girl, she will do the rest. So this has really at its core a modernity message that girls lack knowledge, that they're burdened by their culture, which and their tradition, which is always negative, and that if they're given knowledge, if they're given education, that they can then transform their world. And so we know this to be a quite oversimplistic message, right? Poverty, hunger, these are complex, multifaceted issues that require a lot to actually change and be transformed. And these can neglect the power hierarchies that girls are situated within and also places the burden on them to save their families. So in the course, we reflect on these kinds of things that can creep into our work and that become sometimes part and parcel of how we operate. Let's go to the next slide. And what we're going to do now is just a brief activity for you to reflect on, and we do this in the course as well, reflect a little bit on where you might have personally experienced or observed colonial behaviors within research. And that could be assessments, monitoring and evaluation studies, formal research, any kind of data collection, where you might have seen some of these colonial behaviors that we talked about, being top down, not listening to community knowledge or expertise, making decisions in a really arbitrary way, having this righteous tone, and making assumptions about people who are other to us. So you can go to menti.com and enter this code, or you can also just use your phone if you would like to and scan that QR code. And let's take a couple of minutes now just to write maybe a few lines or a sentence of an example where you've experienced or observed these colonial behaviors in your work. So I'll give us a minute or so to do that.
Everyone's taken the QR code already. I'll stop sharing the screen temporarily so that we can start sharing your responses as they come in.
Take another minute or so for that. Any experiences where you've witnessed these dynamics?
Michelle, maybe you can share your screen for the Menti. Thanks.
Great. So let me start to read some of these out as you're continuing to contribute to this. So not sharing research results with study participants, communities and local community civil society organizations, having this kind of extraction within data. The images we use, so again, these can often be quite demeaning, can be disrespectful and cannot reflect the dignity of the communities that we're working with. Western treatment or health programs by international NGOs not contextualized to communities. There's often this idea that there's a model of, this is best practice. This is what we're implementing from a manual, and we'll come and do the same approach in a different setting. And so we talk a little bit about some examples of that and then what it means to actually then expect to see changes and to be tracking indicators around something that has come in really very much from the outside. Just the name development is colonial. Someone has written when referring to impact using quotes, thanking a donor and knowledge extraction. So a few really tangible examples here of where we see colonial behaviors creeping into our work. The communication pages of impact reports, yes. So the way we depict and talk about data. Colonial language, so terms that often people mention in the course, terms like beneficiary, or vulnerable or marginalized, they all have a particular connotation, and they're used by certain actors to label other actors. Being funding led, also a really big one as well. People often talk about how they respond to calls for proposal that are based on what the funder wants to research or what they want to program on. And that might not necessarily reflect what is important to communities, but people kind of squeeze their programs into that mold, or they adapt and they do this because that is what the donor asked for. I can see a comment in the chat as well. This kind of top-down decision-making using Western practices as normal. I never knew it was a colonial mindset. We used to accept their practices thinking they must be correct. Yes, a lot of this is knowledge that we take for granted. Well, this is the way it is. This is the programming model. These are the indicators we have to use, without necessarily reflecting, well, actually, who decided and who's the one that made the decision that said, you need to use these indicators, you need to measure these particular outcomes, and where does the assumption come from? So a lot of what we do in the course is really trying to unravel some of the normal ways of thinking about research and monitoring and evaluation that we might have all been perpetuating as well in our own work. And we think about, are there different ways in which we can measure change? What might it look like for the communities we work with to have more say and more voice? And what are some approaches and practical strategies that we can use to make that happen? So a little taster there for you. Do click on the link, I think, which Lucy will share in the chat as well, where you can have information about the course, which is running next month from the 12th to the 15th of November. It's a 4-day course. We do 3 hours each day, an hour and a half, then we break for an hour, then we have another hour and a half. And it's a great opportunity to learn and to come away with the really practical steps. This, I think, will be the 6th or 7th time that I've run this course. So really looking forward to meeting all the new participants. Thanks, Lucy. I'll hand back over to you.
Michelle just sounds absolutely amazing. I really want to do it. I hope I will one day. And probably everyone else feels the same. Thanks so much for the presentation. You managed to really put across a lot. You helped us learn and unlearn within a very short space of time. So thank you. The information is in the chat. So please have a look at the link and find out more information about how to sign up. Now, I'm very happy to pass over to Emily B. Brown, and she's going to talk about her training, which is gender and inclusion in proposals, strategies and tools for an integrated approach, which will be running on the platform from on the 2nd, 4th, 6th, 9th, and 11th
of December.
of December.
Of December. Yeah.
Of December.
Great. Okay, so thank you for sharing the slides, and thank you for the brief introduction on Lucy. As Lucy just mentioned, this course will be running the first 2 weeks in December on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's a 5-day course, 15 live hours of training. So next slide, please. This will be my 7th cohort. I've done this training 6 other times previously, so in December it will be the 7th. I start with my contact information because sometimes at the end we're a little rushed. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, you can see my profile linked there. A little bit about myself. I have 15 years of experience in the field of international development and 18 in the field of women's empowerment and gender equality. I'm currently an independent consultant. Besides training, I also am a technical writer. I work on a lot of business development and proposals, as well as gender and inclusion analysis. You can see in this photo, I love to scuba dive with my friends in my free time. I live in Key West, Florida, where there's a lot of good scuba diving. So this is a photo of myself and my friends from last year. All right, next slide. Okay, so if you're new to this course, what is it about? Who is it for? The focus of this course is both on helping to develop proposals that are integrated with gender and inclusion considerations, but also to mainstream gender and inclusion in an organization's overall business development processes. So it's both and. It's both integrating in a proposal and helping participants learn how you can integrate gender and inclusion in the overall business development processes. It's well suited, this course, for 2 professional cohorts, for business development professionals, as well as gender and social inclusion specialists. For business development professionals, you may be seeking to improve or make more consistent the integration of gender and inclusion across the business development lifecycle. And gender professionals may be looking to strengthen their toolkit for business development. And while it's helpful to have a background in business development, it isn't required to be able to come away with the knowledge to integrate gender and inclusion across the business development lifecycle and in proposals. And then similarly, participants do not need a lot of prior knowledge or training about gender and inclusion frameworks and concepts, because this training, you don't really need that background in order to come away with the learnings. I added this link here to the slide because it will take you to a video that's about 2 minutes long that kind of describes a little bit more in depth who this course is for and a course overview. So next slide, please. So we kick off the 5-day course by all getting on the same page with regard to gender and social inclusion concepts. That allows all of us to take part in the course with kind of the same base knowledge of these foundational GESI concepts. So GESI stands for gender equality and social inclusion. This is just a smattering of some of the types of frameworks that we look at. The gender integration continuum there at the bottom of the slide. On the right, that's a framework called the socio-ecological framework. And we go over a number of concepts like equity and equality that are often used in the same way, but actually have very different meanings. In this way, this is why it isn't very necessary to have a deep understanding of gender and social inclusion to take part in this course, because we do cover these frameworks on the first and second days. Next slide, please. So this is an example of a business development life cycle. Business development professionals or people familiar with business development, they'll tell you that two of the most important components are planning and strategy. So if you are familiar with the business development life cycle, you can see that there is a lot of planning and strategy that goes into this. But what we find a lot with global development organizations is that when rubber meets the road and a bid is released, many organizations scramble to be able to meaningfully integrate Jesse into the proposal and project design. And that's because they lack established processes and tools to help them plan and strategize at each of these phases of the business development lifecycle. Next slide, please. So that's what we do in this course, is that we discuss and practice using tools that can support teams to meaningfully integrate gender and inclusion in project design processes and in the proposal. So what you're looking at here is the gender and social inclusion integration for business development toolkit that all participants receive when they participate in this course. So there are currently 6 tools that can be adapted and used by participants and can be modified to support business development teams. I'm sorry, I have something in my eye. Just give me 1 second. Okay, thank you. Okay, so in addition, yes, was there a question?
Yeah, just checking you're okay.
Yeah, I'm fine. I just just an eyelash I needed to get out of the way. Okay, so we use these tools that I have developed, and you have access to them as a participant. We also look at external tools, and I'll be talking a little bit more about that. I don't have a lot of time to go into detail on each of these tools, but let me just take the first one, Jesse Integration Capture Planning Template, and let me tell you a little bit more about it. This can be integrated. It is a document that helps a Jesse focal point kind of organize and prepare for when a solicitation is released. Parts of it could be adapted or modified to existing organizational templates, or it can be used as an internal guide for the Jesse focal point. We also have a design session agenda. If you are able to facilitate a gender design session, this gives you some ideas. There's budget inputs, examples of budget inputs, a sample gender and social inclusion advisor job description, a table to help you organize desk research, and a writing primer, which not only helps a Jesse focal point keep all of their ideas in one place, it can also be used by other writers to make sure that gender and social inclusion is being integrated across all aspects of the proposal. Next slide. So in this course, we review 3 bilateral donors' Jesse-related policies, priorities, and strategies. Often this includes USAID and the US government, so you can see here a sample of their Jesse-related policies. However, we don't have to look at US government. Like I said, we review 3 bilateral donors. This is selected based on the results of a pre-course survey. So participants are able to help shape the content of the course to make sure that it meets their needs. Now, this course does focus typically on bilaterals. I do not have as much focus on individual foundations or on multilaterals like the UN or the World Bank, because those proposal processes vary so much by donor. Bilaterals tend to kind of use the same type of business development process, which is what this course is shaped around. When we look at the donor policies in the course, we talk about why it's important to be understanding and familiar with donor policies and how to apply them to business development. We have a group activity to unpack individual policies and to think about how we can apply those to strengthen project design, but also, but also to make sure that our project design is going to be competitive to a donor. This is kind of, in a way, linked to what often comes up as a conversation on decolonialism, because we might have different ideas about the best way to design a project, but we still need to win the award and the money. So we do have to be aligned with our donor policies. So there is some tension there, and something that we talk about and unpack throughout the course, not just with relation to this module. We unpack the various elements of decolonization that touch on business development, project design, and proposal writing. Next slide. Another external tool that we learn about throughout the course or during the course is the gender equality marker. You can see on this slide 3 examples, screenshots from top to bottom, the Gates Foundation, from CARE, and from Save the Children. And we discuss what a gender marker is, we discuss when it should be used, and we discuss why it's a helpful tool for project design and proposal development. And next slide. On the last day, we talk about partnering, among other things. We also address resistance to integrating gender and inclusion in proposals. But I think it's important to show you a little bit about this module on partnering to advance equality and equity, because it's not just about choosing the right partners, it's also about applying those feminist and gender equitable principles to the process of selecting and working with partners, particularly local partners. On this slide are some of the strategies for how we can use those Jesse principles to engage with partners in a more equitable partnership and relationship. This, again, I think links to Michelle's course on decolonization in some ways, because what we're seeking here is to not have such a top-down relationship with our partners, but rather engage them as full and equal partners in the development of our project design. There was a survey done in 2020 of civil society organizations in the global South. And what it found was that about 84% of respondents said that they do collaborate with international organizations. Of that, 85% of those global South civil society organizations stated that the relationship is not mutually beneficial. So we want to be able to have the tools at the end of this course to apply a more positive form of partnership. I think there's maybe one more slide, and that is my wrap up. I did not have a lot of time to go over the course, but I hope I've given you a taste of what it covers. This is not comprehensive of everything that we would learn. If you want to learn more, feel free to reach out to me. Again, I shared my LinkedIn profile, and I'll put it in the chat here in a moment. The link to the sign up is here. And I hope I see you in December, the first 2 weeks of December. I hope I see some of you in the course, and I look forward to hosting the 7th cohort then. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. I think you gave us a really clear overview, and thank you for being so generous with the materials that you've shared as well, because I think we get a really good sense of what we would get out of this course as participants. And you were very clear about the benefits that it will bring for us as professionals. So thank you so much for sharing that. I will also say that if any of you with us today have any questions for the trainers, please feel free to put them in the chat as we go, because we'll be taking a round of questions at the end. So first of all, we continue our presentations of the remaining trainings, but if you have any questions that come up as we go, please just drop those in the chat and we'll come to them at the end. Thanks again for sharing your LinkedIn, Emily. We can all share ours as well. So I'm very happy to introduce to you now Unjeri Kimotho, who's going to introduce our course. I believe that your internet issues are now resolved, Unjeri, and you are back with us, which is great to see. So I'll pass over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucy. Thank you so much, everybody. You're most welcome. It's nice to have you all. So just a little bit about myself and how to describe myself, because there's various ways you can communicate about oneself. So I usually choose different ways of putting myself out there. So by the first symbol is to say that I have 16 years of experience working in development and humanitarian aid. And my specialization is on three broad categories. So the first one is organizational growth and development, in which interlaces with accessibility, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we are going to dive a little bit about it because it's the core essence of the course I'll be taking. Any of you will be interested to attend, and I hope all of you. And then the other one is also a feminist scholar and also author. I have a couple of publications that are under my belt, and one of them that I'm really happy about is Reimagining Development, in which the Global South feminist structures and positionality take lead. I also have a couple of other publications which are more of I would say a basket of tools that are related towards how do you make or how can you change trajectories of organization towards pivoting them for growth and also developing, and also inside that bringing the ASCII aspect of investing in resources, and the most critical resource being our own staff and colleagues. And the last one, which is that bright card there, is that beyond engaging in this space of uh, programmatic work, which then I think we've already heard about in terms of gender equality, social inclusion, and organizational development, and looking at issues to do with accessibility, diversity, equity, and inclusion. The other one that I am also passionate about is policy advocacy. So looking at foreign feminist policies at a global macro level, and also trying to bring all this together. And the last bit of that very tiny box is a personal description of myself. Like I always say that you give me a mess and I'll give you structure. And that's why I really try to bring in and synchronize my energy around organizational development, and especially looking at different aspects of functionalities that are within any business typology, be it a civil society organization, be it a social impact sector. So that in a nutshell is Njeri Kimoto, and I'll dive a little bit next to the course. So I just picked a little bit of something interesting that we could learn about that threads into the course. It's not the holistic amplification of the course, but at least it gives us a little bit of a teaser of what to be expecting. So one of the things I will be doing throughout my course is shattering assumptions and making the workplaces more diverse. And Lucy, please help me to play the video there.
Certainly. I'm going to play. You let me know if you can hear it. Can you hear it?
No.
No. Okay, so give me 1 second. Maybe Njeri wants to carry on while I'm just sorting out the video, and I will get that sorted now.
No worries. So maybe just to kind of give them the lay of the land is that we are right now talking about issues to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion at workspaces, be it in a private sector firm, be it in a non-government organization. And this is also being promoted by the push that is happening within the ecosystem, that social governance is a key element into running transparent and accountable business practices. And this then gives us the drive to look at issues to do diversity, equity, and inclusion. And now that Lucy is back, let's see how some of these things work in a more realistic element.
I would be amiss if I said I never have any biases. It's a conscious and a constant effort to avoid them.
There were so many questions that we had about whether or not working with people with disabilities would work.
When we first introduced the idea, most people would say, I'm really worried about this. This is not a safe environment.
Because this is a restaurant, so I'm dealing with a lot of knives. I'm dealing with the hot oil, big equipment.
We have pressures and deadlines like every other place of business, so I had to look at my own concerns.
We were contacted by a job developer. She came in and she talked about the fact that people she represented with intellectual or developmental disabilities like repetitive work. And some of our work is the epitome of repetitive work. But even then we didn't think it would work because of the workplace itself. There are sheets of glass the size of a wall in your house. There are saws, there are punch presses that can amputate. It's scary for us. How is it going to be for someone with a differing ability? We brought in one person. She did the job perfectly. She did a really good job. And that's how it grew. It grew from that kind of real trepidation and real concern in the beginning of saying, this is really working.
I had an apprehension, to be sure. Having a son with a disability, an emotional disability, an ADHD, there were certain behavioral issues that one saw as a parent, oppositional behavior, that made for difficult parenting. Was I ready possibly to bring that type of behavior into the workplace that I'd seen play out parent to child that might play out employee to employer? And Jomar came in, and Jomar was a very shy, averse to eye contact, quiet, but presented well and went to work doing primarily data entry, spreadsheets. Became a very talkative, not too talkative, he wasn't disruptive, but became engaged and would smile and no complaints. In fact, the opposite. The fears and consequences one has about bringing your own home-based conflicts into the office, that didn't happen.
There are assumptions that we make that individuals on the spectrum sometimes are unable to pick up on visual cues, or they really don't have a sense of humor. And so one of the managers throughout the day, she kept referring, I'm just going to flip my lid. I'm just going to flip my lid. And one of the individuals on the spectrum said, well, we're not seeing that your lid flipping. And if that did occur, would that be off the top or off the bottom? And they not only got what, she was saying, but they were able to kind of come back with it. It actually had the whole room laughing, right? That's, some of the things where I said, okay, well, you're not supposed to do this. And I would say that we really have to kind of get rid of some of those assumptions, right? And while I might need an accommodation, doesn't mean that I can't perform just as well as a neurotypical employee, or even better in some instances.
The surprising is they are better than us because they follow the instruction. When I hire people, I tell them to make bread recipes. They will do, 1 pound of flour, 10 gram of yeast, and if there is 1 or 2 gram, it's less, we are running out of the things. They don't tell me, they just make a bread and it's not that good. But with these kids, if there is half a gram missing, they will come and say, I cannot do this because the half a gram of yeast is missing. I said, wow, that's what I need, I like to open a bakery that's only autistic kids can work. I just hire them.
You can't, in my opinion, in today's society, be a company that's considered a model and not have diversity and inclusion as part of your overall strategy and your commitment. When you bring in individuals that have a different perspective, it allows us to be better citizens, better corporate leaders, and also allows us then to provide services that support the broader communities that we serve.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. You can move back to the slides. I think we all relate to different typologies that we've seen there, and in terms of diversity and inclusion. And in macros, we are not just going to be looking at what are the strategies that you can use to bringing aspects of inclusion and diversity that are just geared towards hiring. We want to look at how can we create a workplace culture that has the DNA of inclusion, bringing in the intersectionality lens to it. So looking at not only the issue of being differently abled, different education levels that we have, age, and all that intersecting social identities that are there with us as employees at the workplaces. So we are going to beyond human resource aspects of using it as a route towards inclusion. We are going to look at the organization itself. How do we bring that culture, the culture itself? So we're going to do a funnel approach, a broad base, and then start really diving into the culture of inclusion or exclusion and see how that plays out in any organization that we have. Next, Lucy. But I think we need to ask ourselves, what are we up against? Because if we are really looking and really being realistic about organizations and the organization culture, it's so invisible. It's so embedded within the things that are there. So how do we tackle something that is so hard to articulate, that is so unperceivable? Where do you even start? And that is the essence of the course that I'll be taking us through. So where do you start? Where do you end up? How do you start? What are the tools to enable you to make that head start? But not only make the head start, make those practical, realistic, lived experience examples, because I have been working in this sector for almost 16 years. And I know that it's not just ticking the box. There's much more into it when you talk about transforming organization, using the route of diversity and equity, and starting first and foremost looking at the organizational culture itself. Next slide, Lucy. So I created, after having been in this world and trying different aspects, so whatever I'm going to be bringing to the course is my lived experience. After having taken a stab at it, sometimes failed, sometimes succeeded, I put together this building block approach in which cultural awareness has a very good nexus with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then this building block approach, where do you start? The foundational elements of it. So for my particular course, which is a 3-day course with a 1 bonus day, we are going to cover the foundational elements, because what happens in most instances after doing this work for such a long time is that we just latch on to diversity, equity, and inclusion, thinking that you are going to change that and transform institution, where, as I said, before this particular slide, we had that visual of where do you start? What are you up against? What you are up against is an institution that has been there existing, done the same thing over and over again. And therefore, we cannot afford to cheat ourselves that we are going to just go into the aspect of diversity, equity, and inclusion without taking it from you build block after block after block. And what you're seeing in front of you is this building block approach, where the first three phases are all about taking a retrospect with the organization, but also taking a very strategical approach, because of institutional organizational change is a long-term strategy, but we also need to pace it out, because we are cognizant, and I'm also cognizant, that most of this work, we don't have funding for it. And if we are going to then take it all on one bowl, then it's gonna collapse, and all we are going to be doing is talking the talk and not walking the talk. So my course allows us to start actually voicing into or speaking into the foundational element as we prepare to the kickoff and the conversion stage. In the fourth stage, it's where diversity, equity, and inclusion happens. But in my particular course, we'll cover the first phase, and then as we continue moving along, we'll see more and more signups where we are almost in a learning trajectory, but also in a strategy of implementation, because every midterm, long-term, short-term strategy has its own key objective, and that's how it is interfaced with these building blocks. Next slide, Lucy. So in a nutshell, what we are going to be interfacing with is retooling, new skilling, and then learning some of the things that we hold or we even put so dear to our hearts, and we think this is the right way to go. But when you step into an organization, when you step into the face of having others into your own environment, you realize there are some things that you have to unlearn. You realize there are new skills you need to acquire. You realize that there are new tools that you need to have, or even the tools that you have, you need to sharpen and chisel them out in a way that they allow you as an expert, whichever expert you are, they allow you as an expert towards coming into the working environment in such a way that you add value and not subtract value out of it. So whose is this course for? This course is for anyone, any colleague, any staff working in development, humanitarian aid, corporations, private sector businesses, impact investment firms, civil society organization, NGOs, INGO, philanthropy and donor institution, anyone who has anything called an organization. This is a course for you that would really, really gear you up into improving your governance and leadership mechanism. And when is it going to be happening? It's every TNT, the Tuesday and Thursdays. So starting November, and then we move again to the other T, which is 21st of November, and then 28th, 26th of November, sorry. And we are going to have a bonus course recap on the 28th of November. What are the timings that are there? So London timings is just slightly after lunch, because it's going to be a 3.5-hour course. And for those in the East African continent is between 3 o'clock and 6:30. And for those in DC or in the US, this is going to be an early morning. It's an early morning coffee course where you're taking your coffee and really thinking through and reflecting about deconstructing assumptions and how you're going to transform organization. So I kindly request that you join me in the month of November, and we make a transformatory journey into changing how things are done and changing the status quo for us who are working in the space, but also those coming after us. Thank you so much, and I hand over back to you, Lucy.
Thanks so much. And Jerry, I feel again like I got a really good sense of what we can get from your course. I really like unlearning. I really like what you taught us about. Like, we know about this organizational culture and it's invisible, but how on earth are we supposed to do if it's invisible? And then also the way you're so realistic, you're like, these are 6 phases. We start with the beginning. And I think that's really good too. Like you say, we often try to rush things. So I feel certainly we have a really good sense of what your training is about and who it's for. You said is for anyone who works in or has an organization, which is, of course, all of us, whether it's an independent one, a small one, or a very large one. So thanks again for sharing your insights with us. So before we move into the discussion of my training, which will be our final presentation for today, I'd like to ask you to reflect on how would you expect to feel at the end of a feminist learning experience? So I'm going to put here a Menti into the chat. And I'll also share a QR on the screen if you prefer to take it from your phone. How do you expect to feel at the end of a feminist learning experience? Here you have the Menti on the screen, and I shared the link to join if you want to go direct from your computer. I'll start sharing this straight away so you can see the responses as they come in. Okay, so we already have some quite clear, strong themes and emotions coming through here. You can see very clearly right in the middle we have empowered. So at the end of a feminist learning experience, we want to feel empowered. We expect to feel empowered by the learning experience itself, regardless of what knowledge it was that we've acquired. And then we go to inspired. And that's, I would say, the second one that's coming out there. So after feeling empowered, which as you can see is very personal, I want to feel personally empowered, then we have inspired. So again, regardless of what the content is, whatever we're learning about, we would like to feel that we come out of that training inspired and really kind of motivated for change. And then if you look all around, refreshed, joyful, bold. These are really beautiful words. Excited, ready, understood is really nice as well. Embraced by community, compassionate, equipped and resourceful. So we want to, we want to have the knowledge. We want to really feel like we've got some good knowledge out of the training. But as you can see, when you look around here, in terms of the feelings that we hope to take away, more of these are about how the training made us feel and the learning experience itself than exactly about the content. So this is really nice. And really what I want to do and what I hope that I do with my training is help you to not just have that kind of experience, but for you to learn yourself, how do I deliver that kind of experience? So I hope that at the end of my training, you come away feeling like, wow, I'm equipped to deliver that kind of experience. I can deliver a feminist learning experience, and I can really be confident that I can offer that experience to my participants. So my course is called How to Be a Gender Trainer. And like many of my colleagues here, I've run this training a lot of times. This will be the 8th time that I've run this training. So as a participant in this cohort, you get the benefit of all of the evaluation of the previous courses. And because I am a specialist in trainer, I take evaluation really, really seriously. I mean, we all do. But after each edition, I will then go in, revise, come back, refine, change. And there's a lot of deep reflective work as well that goes in for me as a trainer from one edition to another in terms of what worked, what didn't work so well. And I encourage everyone my participants to be very frank with us about that too. So what will you get from this training? You will, at the end of this training, be able to understand the theoretical and conceptual foundations of gender training. So what is it that underpins this? Because I'm sure that many and maybe most of you, or even all of you, have done some form of training, facilitation, teaching before. So it's not so much, I would expect it's not necessary to have previous experience, but most of us come with some kind of background. But what the reality is that often we haven't ever been trained to train. And one of the things that we need in order to do that is understand what is the ground on which we stand, what is the intellectual, political legacy from which we draw in order to be able to create these kinds of emotional experiences for our participants. As well as the theory, you will get the basic tools and skills that you need to deliver training in a confident way. You'll also explore lots of things that are very grounded, like, for example, what does it mean to be a gender trainer? How much will I get paid? What kind of jobs are there? How much work is there? And I really thought just today when I was going through the thinking of, who is this for? What are the benefits? What would you get for it? I do a lot of training, very experienced trainer. I work with so many organizations, and I have to tell you that organizations are absolutely desperate for high quality trainers. I can tell you there is a demand for this work, and the work is definitely out there. So certainly if you're thinking of something that you want to take a new skill to your skill set, we are desperate for trainers, honestly, who can teach on their subject areas. So you'll also understand a little bit about the field and some of the core challenges. And really after we've done the theoretical stuff, we go then into practice. So in small groups, you and with your other participants, who are likely to be from all around the world, some come from our in-house trainers, others are independent trainers. So we have a really interesting mix of backgrounds and experiences, and everyone usually has quite different content. So maybe someone's a specialist in gender-based violence, another is a specialist in gender and sexualities, another in gender responsive budgeting, for example. So you bring your content and your knowledge to the training, and I support you to turn that into really engaging feminist training that helps people feel like you want to feel at the end of one of these experiences. So there's plenty of time for you to practice everything. And we also have a really nice environment where we agree on our own rules, we develop our own set of feedback, we have a feedback mechanism, and we provide each other with feedback, and we very kindly kind of support each other to reflect on what we've learned and our mistakes and what we might do differently a second time. So even if you have experience in training, but you'd like to push yourself a bit further, this is your chance to try out maybe some methodologies that you've not worked on yet, or play around with some topics that you haven't been quite brave enough to work on yet. So you can consider this as a workshop for helping you find out what kind of trainer that you want to be and how you want to improve in your style of being a trainer. Really, I believe that most of us can be good trainers. I don't think there's one thing that makes a good trainer. I don't think that there are a fixed set of characteristics that are required to be an excellent trainer. And I think that we can all find our journey to get to being the kind of trainer that we are capable of being and that we want to be. So we have a very clear learning by doing approach. Straight away, we start with a learning by doing approach. It's a very horizontal and reflexive and collective learning environment. So all the time we're saying, what did we learn here? Why did we do this? Did this work? Did it not work? Was that a bit weird? So we have a kind of a very open way of talking about how everything's going. I also talk through what's going on in the back of my head, because when we attend trainings, often we see that the trainers are very polished and very experienced, which of course the trainers that we have here today are, but often in the back of our heads, we have like, did that work? And was that at the right time? And so I kind of say those things out loud. So when you're on this How to Be a Trainer course, you don't see a polished trainer. What you see is kind of the kind of backstage of what goes on when we run these kinds of trainings. So you get to see the kind of all the warts and all, so to speak. And we have an open, comfortable place for us all to make mistakes and also celebrate the things that we do well. And you have lots of time and space to try out different aspects of training and push yourself a little bit to be brave, and we encourage each other to do that. So I really feel like my colleagues have delivered a really good amount of content on what their courses is about. So I feel like I'd like to leave some time open for questions. So I'm just going to take 5 minutes to let you know a little bit about what the theoretical content of the course is and what you will take away, as well as this practical component. And then that will give us 10 minutes for questions. So if you have any questions that are coming up for me or for any of the other trainers, please drop those in the chat and we will come to you afterwards. It can be a question about something that you've heard or any practical questions about our courses. So I think I said at the beginning about these 4 different feminist pedagogical approaches. Now, often we do these without knowing that we're doing them, but with my course, you will learn where they come from, what are the feminist, intersectional, anti-racist, and critical whiteness queer pedagogies on which we draw in order to develop this intersectional feminist pedagogical approach. So we start with a participatory horizontal learning experience. So this means that we construct a horizontal learning environment, and as a trainer, you are a facilitator and a learner at the same time. We construct, thank you, bell hooks, a feminist classroom. Love this idea of a feminist classroom. And it's always fascinating to me online. What does a virtual feminist classroom look like? So we play around with that quite a lot. We pay a lot of attention to the issues that have come up today. So you'll all be training in different contexts. We are all from different contexts. I love the way that Jerry said there are many ways that I can introduce myself. And today I'm choosing this way. And I also love the way that you used images for that as well. So, I mean, we're learning these new tricks all the time for training. I think that's a wonderful way for participants to introduce themselves. And it allows, so, we're building in all the time these different dimensions of our privileges, our backgrounds, and also the current global context with which we are in. We don't operate outside of reality. We operate very much embedded and grounded with what's going on in the world, and also within our institutions, and of course within our personal lives as well. Many of us are seriously affected by what's going on in personal ways, and some people in very concrete and material ways, and others emotionally, politically. So, we create that space where we can hold that together. And this is where, again, takes us to our next principle, which is about personal and lived experience. But this is about engaging with privileges, intersectionality, marginalizations, all in the plural, playing around with, you will learn how to do this, but also in this training, you get to explore that as a participant and how you would like to deal with that all as a trainer. So we'll deal with things like, okay, so what happens when you have someone racist or sexist in your training? What do we do? How do we deal with them? So these are the kinds of real world questions that we reflect on. I also have around 13 years of experience as a trainer and as a researcher on training. So I share with you a lot of my experiences, and I very much also share the things that I've done wrong and the mistakes that I've made and what I learned from them. I don't give you a polished version. I say, look, I did this once and it was a disaster, and I think it was a disaster because of this. So hopefully you also take away some of the benefits of the mistakes that I've made, and then go away and make all of your own, and then come back and tell us about them. Impact, results, and change. This is super important. Training has to be part of a feminist political project. And we want to hold our participants accountable for gender equality. So we talk a lot about how do we hold learning participants accountable. And this is a very interesting conversation to be talking about in terms of, particularly if we're working, for example, in the UN or donor agencies, where we know that we have these colonial dynamics. We know these are racist, sexist, patriarchal organizations embedded in global capitalism. What can we do to get our participants to take some kind of accountability going forward for how they're going to, what options they will take following the training? And critical thinking, we will learn how to encourage critical thinking in training scenarios, and talk about how this is easier in some scenarios than others. So these are really kind of the foundations of feminist pedagogical principles, pedagogy being the art and science of teaching and learning. And this is what I want you to come away with theoretically, but also it's in practice from the first moment. You will experience the feminist classroom. You will reflect on the feminist classroom, how we're constructing it, how we can improve it, and you will also develop your own ideas about what feminist classroom looks like to you. We have some other theoretical aspects that we draw on, which I'm just going to go through quickly because we want to have some time for questions. So we look at the training typology. So we kind of break down these kind of overarching, very ambitious principles about, right, what would our feminist pedagogical utopia look like? And then we say, okay, right, what does this mean in the real world, in real world training? So we look at different types of training. How do we approach different types of training? What are the specific things we need to take into account? And then we also look at the training cycle, which is very similar to the project or program cycle, but often with as trainers, we often make the mistake of pouring everything into the training moment itself. And what we spend a lot of time talking about, and the trainers here will back me up, is there's so much that goes into the other aspects of the training cycle. It's these areas that really make or break not just the success of your training, but the likelihood that you will have an impact on results and meaningful change with your training. So you will learn as well that it takes quite a lot of time, takes a lot of pressure, it takes a lot of intense preparation and deep thought to really design and deliver meaningful training. And as you can see, the trainers today, we've all delivered our training 5, 6, 7 times, and I'm sure we have all learned a lot. Even though it's the same training in theory, the things that you learn each time really helps. And I just think that more and more what I learn is that it's all about analysis and planning, evaluation, design and development, implementation. And the reason that I like this approach is because it doesn't rely on your personality or your charisma, shall we say. Because I think that traditionally we had expectations that trainers would hold a room. They would be very charismatic people. And I think a lot of that is very gendered, very racialized. I think builds on colonial ideas, coming back to Michelle's presentation about like the common sense idea of what is a good trainer. So the fact that actually you can, and also in Jerry's video about neurodiversity. So there are ways that you can adapt your training style to you as a person based on your differing abilities and characteristics, because it isn't just about how you are in that moment of the implementation. It isn't just about the performance. There's so much more in that. And that's why I want to encourage people to really think, if you don't know if training's for you, because, for example, you don't like public speaking, for example, or you feel very drained, you have your social battery drains very quickly. I will help you to become the kind of trainer that suits your personality and your individual capacities. We have a preparatory session, then we look at the conceptual foundations, then you plan and deliver your activities in small groups. As I've said, we look at gender training as a field and a profession, and then we also have a follow-up session around 2 months after to see how you're doing and how you're getting on. This training will run on 5 different days in November. The timings are the same as Jerry's. I can't say it as nicely as her. You'll have coffee in the morning. You'll just have had lunch, but that same kind of vibe, like the way what she said. So it's the same for us based in Europe. It's afternoon. For those of you based in East Africa, it's slightly later. And for those of you in the Americas, it'll be quite early in the morning. Sometimes we offer them as well at a different time frame for those who live in Asia or in Australasia. So if you're based in those time zones, we also sometimes offer those time zones. But for this year, for this quarter, we're offering this framework. So with my course, you will get the skills, tools, and confidence needed to deliver high quality intersectional feminist gender training. And I hope to leave you feeling like you would like to feel at the end of a feminist learning experience. But more important to me, or equally important, is that you can then go and replicate that in your own way to help people come out of your training experiences with those kinds of feelings. So that's the end for me. And we'll pass now to see if you have any questions for any of the trainers. Please feel free to write in the chat or just unmute your microphone and ask us a question or just say hi.
And I think there is already a question in the chat for the trainers around learning and what we might recommend for a beginner in the field of gender and inclusion.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Emily. Any other questions? We're going to take a quick round. Please feel free to write to us with questions as well. We've shared our LinkedIn. You can contact us via the Fabulous Feminist LinkedIn page as well. And I'm just again going to share to you the links to the trainings here in case you want more information.
So it's better to write the questions than to...
No, go for it, Safi.
Hi.
Feel free.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, what are the most common challenges that you face as a gender training, because you've been doing this for a while, and how you overcome them?
Yeah, okay, thank you. I don't want to take up too much time with the answer, and you know what I'm going to say, come on the course, but getting the people there in the first place, actually, that's why I would always go with analysis and planning. So, you know, if you're talking about an institution and you're running a gender mainstreaming workshop for project staff, and you look, and it's all female project staff who've signed up. This is an example. I really think in reality, we often get the people who are already, you know, already disposed to engage with our ideas. So for me, that would be my response. It's that first bit, that analysis and planning, that outreach to actually get the right people into the room. Because I think once you've got them in the room, you can do great work. But if you can't get them there in the first place, we end up speaking a little bit to a more limited group of people. So that would be my answer for that one.
Thank you. Yeah, that's...
From the other trainers, any thoughts?
I have also one more question, if that's okay.
Go for it. We've got 2 minutes, so I'm just going to, if you want to give yours, and then I'll look at the others that are in the chat. Some of the ones in the chat we can answer in writing as well.
Okay.
Go on, Safa, go for it.
Yeah, okay. I wanted to ask Najere, how do you address unconscious bias and microaggression in the workplace? Because we know some of these conflicts are like very hard to describe. Like when you, because I worked a lot in leadership role, and there was in certain areas there were conflict with management or stuff, but it was very hard to say. It's like there was an important meeting, I wasn't there, I wasn't invited, and not to make it personal, because you know it's related to your gender, or there's a lot of things that are very hard to describe or to deal with, because they're not like black or white. There's a lot in betweens, and can make them not very hard to describe. So I want to ask about that, how to be firm, and when it comes to like especially women who are in leadership position in an industry that are mostly full of men, and then they see a lot of these, we call them microaggression, or like a little bit that you're being talked to in a condescending manners, or these kind of behaviors, but it's not very easy to confront these behaviors, yeah, in a workplace. So I want to ask about your advice, or how you think these things should be handled.
So I have two basic strategies that we can use. The first one is looking at communication, and in the course we learn how the tips and tricks of how to overcome the triangle of stereotyping, microaggression, and also labeling. So and that also emphasizes on how we communicate. And also the other one, I after so many years of also experiencing these type of things for myself, being in the workplace, I came up with a tool called task-based diversities, where the tool, which I'll be also training us about and also allowing us to take a hands-on experience in using a case scenario, is that the task-based diversity tool allows us to see from a project perspective, also from a workflow perspective, how are tasks divided? Who says what? Who has decision to make over what? And in the end, which team player is part of that particular function? And how do these whole functions come together to create a successful model for the business? So we can look at it from a functionality perspective, but also from a communication perspective. And I'm going to be marrying those two in our training.
Sounds interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, and Jeremy, for the great answer. So for those of you still here, thank you so much for staying with us till the end. So we're going to close our session now. We do hope that you will take a look at the website, learn more about exactly the information on these courses. I'll remind you that if you would like more of an introductory information, then you have the Introduction to Gender Training Self-Paced course. And we also have the membership for those questions around how do I go about being a gender specialist? Where's the best place for me to go? Can you give us guidance? That's exactly what Fabulous Feminists are for. Us as more experienced and whilst also unlearning gender specialists are there to help you and guide you in your careers. And, we really want to harness this energy of all the just awesome feminists, intersectional feminists that are out there and support you on your journeys, because you're the next generation. So thank you to everybody for being with us.
Thank you. Good day.
Thank you. I'm going to put the Friday afternoon song on to play us out.
Bye. Have a good one.
Bye.
Thank you.